Claudio, how you doing?
Doing well, Carol.
So Exfo is very well known in the test and service assurance space. How do companies like Exfo fit within the LSO reference framework?
Well, one of the key things, obviously, with LSO is service providers are looking to automate the way they're delivering Ethernet services, IP services across their network and across domains with other carriers. So that automation, as you know, is key. We've been hearing it this week at the MEF.
Right.
Automation is kind of the key for them to survive, to be able to deliver next generation services. Now, as you automate these services, obviously one of the things you want to do is look at how you provide checks and balances to make sure as these services are being automated, whether it's physical networks or virtual or hybrid, one of the aspects that Exfo brings is the ability to provide those checks and balances.
Okay.
In a couple aspects. Number one is when you're actually instantiating the service, validating that service chain works properly. So leveraging our virtual test elements to be able to validate that chain. The second thing is once that chain is done, is then monitor the service in terms of how is it delivering the SLAs that the customer is expecting.
Okay.
And the third thing is when an anomaly is detected, how do you then run specific test routines to diagnose where that problem is and advance the troubleshooting much more quickly.
Is part of that also building in a closed loop type application where you then actually affect the repairs or affect the changes you need?
Absolutely. So you can actually take that information that we're gathering in real time and provide that as a feed into the orchestration engine.
Okay.
So for example, you may set policies to be able to define and do specific actions when specific KPIs have hit a certain threshold, for example. But always making sure that you do that in real time. So that's one of the key elements that we bring as a solution.
Okay. All right, great. So the addition of an overlay assurance solution, and that's going to clearly add value to the network service providers. I think that's pretty obvious. But what does it do for the end users?
Well, one of the aspects within the LSO, there's the concept of web portal, right? Self-service for the end user. So when you're looking at self-service, you're always thinking about how can you provide a bit more autonomy, similar to what we as consumers want, right? We want to be able to access that video channel when we want it, right?
Right.
So it's the same with the enterprise customers. So one of the added values now as we move to a more NFV and automated environment with the LSO is that service assurance players like Exfo can actually provide added value into that whole web experience for the user. So for example, things like providing much more depth in terms of the performance KPIs. So the end user, we can actually feed that information up to that web portal. The service provider obviously has flexibility in terms of what information they want to send and make visible to the end user. So that's one thing. Second thing is customers are going to be making changes. So to provide that assurance that those changes have been successful and that they continue to operate properly, we can actually automate birth certificates. So every time a change is made, that is sent directly to the end user. So they have a confirmation that the service and all the chain has been done correctly.
Okay.
And the third element is we can provide those end users the ability to actually perform their own test routines. So for example, if they're seeing issues with a service, rather than right away call the service provider, they can actually do tests themselves via the portal that interfaces via open APIs to our system to then do some specific tests and determine whether it could be on their side or they need to start communicating with the service provider.
Okay. This sounds like a much higher level of visibility for the end user than has ever been possible before.
Absolutely. And we offer at Exfo a lot of depth. So for example, on our assurance solutions, we support over 150 tests, right? So depending on the service, whether it's a VoIP video, data type service or application that you want to validate that performance, we can actually provide that visibility.
Okay, cool. User. All right, so which services do you think are going to be the first to benefit from some of the LSO automation potential?
Well, one of the services that we're seeing, and obviously we heard a lot about that this week at the MEF 17, is SD Wan.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, so SD Wan is an area we've been involved with for the past couple of years in proof of concepts, and now we've actually moved that to deployments, live deployments. SD Wan is an area like we had talked about in terms of automating, the ability to automate the service activation. So the first time you actually send a device out to the customer prem, whether it's an appliance, dedicated appliance, a white box, we can actually then spin up our virtual agents, for example, and validate that initial turn up.
Okay.
Second thing is, as we mentioned, there's going to be changes, whether it's the service provider or the end user making those changes, leveraging, again, on demand, those virtual agents to be able to validate that chain, and then continuously monitor that service, right? So from branch to branch to public or private cloud, or through the internet as well, right? To validate both the overlay, underlay, and as well as the performance of the end-to-end service.
Okay. So, and you're offering that as a commercial solution today for SD-WAN?
Yes.
Okay.
We actually have three main components that comprise our solution. Number one is Exfo Works, which is our cloud-enabled assurance solution, which essentially is there to interface with the Mano ecosystem in terms of instantiating our test elements or test agents, our virtual agents. Second thing is Exfo Extract, which is our real-time performance analytics engine that takes data in real time from that system, from Works, but can also augment visibility in terms of performance by taking other data, for example, SNMP or data from the elements themselves, whether it's the physical or virtual compute elements. And the third thing is Exfo Ontology. So in March of 2017, we actually acquired Ontology Systems, which is a UK-based company that focused on real-time topology. And when I talk about real-time topology, essentially what Ontology brings, the way I kind of explain it is like an X-ray of the network in real time, right? So you can actually see the way from a networking side how things are interconnected, whether they're virtual elements, physical elements. So it essentially provides a view of that interconnection.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It looks also at what services are running throughout the network and which customers are running over that service. So by providing that real time, coupled with the data that we bring from a performance assurance side, you now have a very strong combination that adds a lot of value in Ethernet-based service management.
So then you can do things like correlate service outages quickly to who's impacted, what services, what customers, things like that?
Absolutely. So you can look at, for example, with our performance system with Works that provides the data with Extract, we create KPIs and KQIs. We're looking at that in real time for the service. Whenever there's an anomaly, we can actually interface with a system like Ontology to then look at what common causes throughout the network could be the cause of those anomalies. And then provide more insights and visibility to our customers, right, so that they can troubleshoot issues much more quickly.
And potentially ward off customer impacts before they even happen.
Absolutely. The main point there is to really predict and then be able to react quickly before it impacts services.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, with NFV and SDN, what challenges do you foresee, and what is Exfo doing to address these?
So with LSO and a lot of the work that we've seen here and the POCs, it's all about automating the services. So I kind of touched on how we can play from an assurance side to provide the checks and balances. But I think the big major transformation that's next that needs to be tackled is how you automate troubleshooting. So it's great that you automate the entire chain. But if troubleshooting isn't automated, then we have an issue. Because today, as we've seen with customers, is they're following this swivel chair where they have a bunch of different information that they need to process and digest. And you can imagine with NFV, it's going to be even more complex because you have the NFVI infrastructure to deal with. So the big challenge that we're tackling with a bit of what I covered before in terms of Ontology with our service assurance is that now when you couple those two together and you make those work in unison, you can actually start automating troubleshooting. Right? And that next level is going to be, once we've kind of gone from this to this, then how do we feed that information in a closed loop into the orchestration domain so that the network itself can heal based on that information.
That's fascinating stuff. Claudio, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.